All right, I want to answer an objection that is going to come in different forms. I'm going to give it to you in one form, but you may not hear it in precisely this form. This might be the kind of objection that you hear in a slightly different form, and it's going to depend on who asks it and how they ask and what the context of the question is. But on the website, I listed it this way. The objection is, I can't believe in God because I have too many unanswered questions. In other words, it might come out something like this. Look, you Christians don't even agree on everything. You don't have answers for half the questions. You disagree what the answer might be. You've got a lot of open questions. How do I reconcile, for example, the sovereignty of God with the free agency of humans? How do I reconcile other questions? Like, what is the exact mechanism by which God creates? What does that look like? These are all kinds of questions that I get, even questions that I hold. Which, for example, what is the clearest reading of Genesis 1, and how did God create the entire universe, and what kinds of steps were taken, and are the days mentioned in Genesis 1 literal days or epic periods of time? Look, Christians argue about these things without landing an answer for any of those things. I at least want to acknowledge to my atheist friends that, yeah, it does appear that we have some open questions. And it appears that I'm not going to be able probably in this lifetime to get answers to those questions. So then the issue becomes, well, okay, so how can you believe in a worldview in which you have open, unanswered questions? That's the nature of the objection. Can you see it, why it's so powerful? There is, unfortunately, appears to be a certain level of certainty in an information age that we're living in that people want to have before they can ever jump in with you. And it's almost always going to be described to you as 100% certain. I cannot jump into this worldview unless I have 100% certainty. Well, how do we respond to those kinds of objections? Knowing that really I could never give anyone 100% certainty about the Christian worldview. Am I just done? Am I just toast? No. Actually, I think we can still move forward. Now, I want to share with you the outline in my head that I typically have when trying to answer that question. I go back to my training as a cold case detective working in a jury setting, and I want to make a couple of quick points. Number one, the first point I want to make is that you don't have to have every question answered in order to know something is true. So that's a point I'm going to have to make. I'll get to that in a minute. And two, I'm going to want to answer that we do have good enough information to make a decision here. Those are the 2 points I'm going to have to reconcile in my answer to these folks who offer that objection. So let me just mine it out a little deeper, and then I'll give you the 60-second version. The first thing I'm going to want to ask is do you think you have 100% certainty about anything you think you know in your life? Because the reality of it is, if you were to mine out those big choices you've made, you aren't 100% certain about anything. Except maybe your own existence, right? That you have thoughts because you're having thoughts now. But in terms of what you think you know about the outside external world, really, what do you think you know to 100% certainty? You could go to your car tomorrow and start the engine and have it blow up in your driveway. It happens all the time to people all over the country. Probably not going to happen to you. It's not reasonable. We have to decide and help people understand there's a difference between what's possible and what's reasonable. I can have possible doubts, yet still convict somebody beyond a reasonable doubt because I don't hold a reasonable doubt. I only hold possible doubts. This is very common, right? You've got lots of possible doubts, but you reason through them. If you think, well, gosh, I found this text from an unknown person on my spouse's cell phone. Well, I guess it's possible your spouse is cheating on you, but if you have a track record with your spouse and you know enough about your spouse to know that isn't true, it won't take long for you to realize that that doubt is not reasonable. That's a possible doubt. But without perfect knowledge, you could really never know with 100% certainty about anything. That's just the case, right? We are limited, finite creatures who don't have infinite knowledge. Therefore, we cannot answer every question. So that's the first thing. Also, as an atheist, I had tons of unanswered questions. As a matter of fact, I've written that entire book, God's Crime Scene, really about the unanswered questions of atheism. Now, I'm not suggesting that that alone is why you should not trust atheism, because you have questions you can't answer. I get that. You have to take a view with unanswered questions. We all hold a view that has unanswered questions. As an atheist, though, I couldn't tell you how the universe came into existence, why it appears to be fine-tuned, how life originated from non-life, why it has the appearance of design if there is no designer, how we have consciousness and free agency, and why there are objective, transcendent moral truths and obligations, and why there's a standard that's objective for goodness by which we judge anything and call it evil. I can't give you good atheistic, materialistic answers for those big key points. I can't. And by the way, the more people study these, the deeper the wormhole gets. I don't think atheism can answer those 8 questions. Now, as a theist, I have some open questions too. Lots. But the question really for me is, which worldview gives me the best answers with the least questions? And of these 2, I think it was clear for me that theism answers the questions in a way that's much more satisfying and seems to resonate with my daily experience in a way that atheism didn't. I know I have consciousness. I know I have free agency. And people like Sam Harris, who are atheists, who do not believe that is even possible, we'll talk about that on a future episode, really have to hold to a worldview in which they think the free agency and consciousness are simply an illusion. And he will even say that. But I don't believe those are illusions. I believe you are actually watching this show right now and thinking about this question yourself because you are a conscious thinking creature who makes free choices. But my Christian worldview can answer that, given that we are created in the image of a conscious, free-thinking God, better than my atheistic worldview, which says we are in a deterministic, purely material, physicalistic universe in which all we have are neurons firing caused by prior neurons that we can't control. And when that kind of deterministic universe, you don't either have consciousness or free agency. Here's the problem. My worldview still has open questions. And so does the atheistic worldview. And what we task jurors when we put them in a panel, we ask them a simple question. Are you the kind of person who can make a decision without every question being answered? Are you the kind of person that really needs to have every question answered before you can even make a decision? If someone says, yeah, I think I am the kind of person who needs every question answered, then we simply say you're excused. Because we can't use jurors that think they have to have 100% certainty. That is not the legal standard. It's beyond a reasonable doubt, not beyond a possible doubt. Now, I've kind of mined out the answer I might be thinking about and the structure I'm thinking about it in. And I also want to add one more thing, that I think that the theistic worldview, because of the evidence we do have, is the closest, best answer with the least unanswered questions. I got to be able to make these kinds of points now in 60 seconds to my friends. So let's just kind of show you what that might look like. Okay, it might look like this. I can't really trust any form of theism because every form has got tons of open, unanswered questions. Even theists, even people who believe this stuff, can't answer all the questions. I would say that's absolutely right, but that's also true in every criminal trial you will ever work. There will always be open, unanswered questions. And in every one of these trials that I've actually won, there were open, unanswered questions, yet every jury came to a conclusion. The right conclusion. Why? Because there's a difference between possible and reasonable. Every worldview has unanswered questions. Don't think for a second that atheism doesn't hold its own unanswered questions. Of course it does. The real question is not, is there a worldview with no unanswered questions? Because there isn't one. The real question is, which worldview has the least number of unanswered questions, the least significant unanswered questions, and the best evidence for its positive value, the kinds of questions it can answer. Now those two kinds of, if you're looking at worldviews under that standard, well, guess what? Theism holds up really well because it can explain the stuff we see in the universe. It can explain the origin of the universe, the fine-tuning we see in the universe, the origin of life in the universe, the fine-tuning and appearance of design in biology, consciousness, free agency, morality, even the standard of good, God, by which we would judge anything and call it evil. It turns out the theistic worldview does a better job of explaining the evidence, even if you think there are still important unanswered questions, and of course there are. Theism answers the most. Okay, now you've had a couple of questions we've asked and answered by giving you kind of the structure, how we might answer it, a longer version and the 60-second version. I hope that is helpful as you get ready to have the most important conversations you're going to have around the holidays, those questions that get raised, if someone does raise them with you, about the nature of your Christian beliefs. Until next week, I'll see you right back here at Cold Case Christianity.